Hi, welcome to Beyond the Map, a podcast about travel, self-discovery, and the beauty found between destinations. I'm Francesca Page, and each week we'll explore the meaningful moments, mindful rituals, and hidden details that make every journey a little more human. Welcome back to Beyond the Map, the podcast where travel meets self-discovery. Today, we're talking about something that's been on so many people's minds this summer, how we're traveling differently and why the journey itself has become just as important as the destination. Joining me today on the show is Jason Gamel, President and CEO of ARDA, the trade association for the timesharing industry, and the creators of GoTimesharing.com. He is also a board member of the Virginia Tourism Corporation. Jason has a unique perspective on where American travel is headed, from epic road trips and national parks to multi-generational family vacations and the evolution of timesharing. Jason, welcome to Beyond the Map. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Francesca.
So let's talk about something. First off, let's talk about where you are in your career and a little bit about you. Let's start with that.
Sure, love to. We won't start quite in the beginning, but I will 100% say I was an accidental hospitality individual. Having gone to school many, many years ago, thinking I was going to find myself in all places in human resources, I ended up going to law school and found a job working in an industry that supported real estate, but most importantly, hospitality, doing legal work for hotels, resorts, timeshares, for instance. That sort of started me on my career, starting it in Florida, spending some time on the West Coast, and then heading back east to Orlando back in the 2000s. I found myself now in year 28 of a hospitality career, working in the legal world, working for a very large real estate and hospitality company, having worked for a trade association, doing advocacy on behalf of the timeshare industry, and now for the last 7 years, leading or being the voice of and leading the trade association that represents the timeshare industry. It's been a career in hospitality and travel in a very accidental but happy way.
We'll lean into this in a little bit, because obviously the hospitality industry, as you and I both well know, has changed drastically, especially over the last decades, for a lot of reasons. But I'll start with your personal journey. Jason, what has travel taught you personally about yourself over the years, do you think?
When you start back into my high school years, we weren't extremely well-traveled as a family, but we had great travel experiences. Really, I think for my family, we were the great American road trip family back in the 1980s when we were traveling. It was long trips from Michigan, where I grew up, to Colorado to visit relatives and to ski. We did that almost 4 years in a row when I was in high school. I will say that sort of great American road trip concept, being in a car that long with family and friends, and we travel with another family, not only did I get a chance to really have fun and enjoy some deep conversations, because there weren't electronic devices back then to keep us busy. So you really had to talk and play games and do all the things and interact. It was wonderful. It was a way for us to spend time together that you just wouldn't do if you were necessarily sitting around the house. And I got to experience different parts of the country, food that I would never eaten. I still remember the 2-inch thick pork chop I had in Iowa City, Iowa, that today drives me to find the best pork chop I can find in restaurants where I go all over the country. Or if it's the time where I get to see relatives or see a new place, for us, the skiing was a whole new adventure, which then brought back all types of memories when I was able to be around my daughters and teach them how to ski. Those are the things that travel to me brought back. The nostalgia of spending time together, the nostalgia of trying new foods, new places, new experiences. And that's now what I see picking back up in the industry that I'm fortunate enough to be in. Now I look for those same things when I take my kids on vacation, when I take my family on vacation, and also when we lead an industry that's leading with experiences and leading with all these great benefits that come along with it.
It's so interesting. And it's been a theme in the last few episodes I've had of Beyond the Map, is this concept of, and it's wonderful to hear, because in Europe, I grew up, sitting in the backseat of a car, getting car sick, driving around and kind of being immersed in the culture of different places. And I had a guest on a couple of weeks ago who was talking just essentially about that, of how this kind of immersive travel where you really did experience the culture because you didn't have anything in between. There wasn't like a bucket list of things. It was kind of, you're in the car, you're driving around, you make a road stop. And for me, it would be like in Italy, and I'd stop and there'd be this grandma's looking kitchen that my parents found on like a Michelin guide. And I would think, why are we here? And you'd go in and have like the best minestrone soup you could have ever imagined, right? And it did make my upbringing so different as somebody that travels, because that's the kind of travel I grew up with. But it's interesting to hear because for me, American travel, at least since I've moved here, seems very different to me and much more, I don't know, organized in the sense of day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. And I do see a huge rise in, and I've said this probably for like 3 years now, the road trip coming back, especially with a lot of people not wanting to fly as much, with difficulties with flights, with fuel prices, with all sorts of stuff that's gone on in the flight industry. And I like to promote, obviously, flying and airlines and all the above, and I'm flying this summer, but the road trip has definitely made a huge comeback, I feel like, in the US. And I was here briefly during the 80s, but I lived in New York in a metropolitan area and I didn't really travel around the country. But for, it's interesting to hear that kind of that whole, I'm trying to think of the movie. What's it on? National Lampoon? Was that the one
Yeah,
where
it's a
he? Yeah,
vacation, sure.
yes. And it's nice to see that, because I do think it gives, even if you can't fly abroad, it gives your kids an experience of like, these are all the different places and these are different states, outside of your own state. And I said, when I first moved here, I also felt like people hadn't even left their state. A lot of people I met, and if you've got a car and you've got wheels, even if you go 2 states over and see a different kind of culture or lifestyle, I think it's definitely eye-opening for
You
families.
you bring up a great point because the road trip doesn't mean you have to go across country. A
Right.
road trip could be within your own state, yeah, just cross state lines. And I think you spotted a trend early on that continues to be a big trend. We see it today in so many ways. In my world, we're finding that 76% of all timeshare travelers are looking to make a road trip this summer. And if you look at that, and that's only many different reasons. One, a lot of resorts are within drive-to destinations of large metropolitan areas like New York, Washington, D.C., where I am, or other major cities. But it's also, like you said, there's costs involved, there's cost factor, there's ease. Travel isn't the same way, and you all recognize that it was 20 years ago. It isn't that easy to get through an airport, and with weather delays and all the issues that come along with air travel, sometimes it could just be easier to say, let's jump in the car and go. And to me, that is something that I think a lot of people in the hospitality industry are starting to capitalize on. Having those offerings where people can go within a day trip. When you're looking at 1 day travel each way, it's not a whole lot different than it takes to fly and rent a car and do all the things it takes to get to a resort. So really, this concept of jumping in the car and going is something that's definitely come back. And I think you made also a very interesting point about itinerary and planning. There isn't as much, we do have limited time. You talk about Europeans who've got more time to vacation. Perhaps it's that opportunity to be a little bit more leisurely about travel and be able to take those excursions. But I also find that people are sort of rebelling against the itinerary. Let's go ahead and just see where this takes us today. Let's
Mm-hmm.
just check out these restaurants. There's so many easy ways to find great restaurants online or through recommendations and reviews. And why not try some of the hidden gems instead of just having everything so?
We're coming up upon a big holiday, 4th of July.
Mhm.
How, and it'll be interesting to see. And I'm leaning on the fact that I think a lot of people are going to be doing these kinds of road trips, and just from personal experience and friends I know, when these kinds of holidays come up, do you see an inclination to do more of the kind of driving, time sharing experience versus going somewhere, flying wise? What are your
I
thoughts on
think
that?
again, it comes back to the busyness of an airport and also the cost and expense. Right now, in particular, I think you've had a few different events come together. Obviously, fuel prices, as you mentioned, being what they are,
Hmm.
and the price of flights in general continuing to go up. If you look at even filling up the tank a few extra times, the dollars and cents usually work, especially with a larger family. I think it's been this year in particular, we're going to see more people hit the road. You've seen AAA put out statistics about record travelers around peak holidays like July 4th coming up. And really, it goes again to the point of people having those destinations which are close to where they live, that they have that option. Or if it's 6 or 7 hours away, why not go ahead and jump in the car instead of having to be at the airport 2 hours early, the flight, the rental car, and so on and so forth. So yeah, the holidays generally bring it out even more when people hit the road. There's no doubt about that. This year, though, in particular, I think as the 10 million timeshare owner families here in the United States decide where they're going to go on vacation and how they're going to spend their holiday, getting in the car driving is a preferred choice.
Brings me to my next question, which, one word that I've said probably carries a lot of misconceptions is timeshare. When someone hears that today, what do you wish they actually knew?
Hearing the word timeshare, the goal for me before I leave my position here at ARDA is that when people hear that word, they think of incredible vacation memories. They think of more space. They think of multiple bedrooms. They think of kitchens. They think of experiences. They think of professional management and safety and security. I want all those to be wrapped up in the word timeshare. I don't want people thinking perhaps about a sales and marketing process that they may associate with the product itself, because we do understand most people as they learn, and we could talk about this in a minute, but I think today's younger travelers see this very differently than, let's say, the boomers, or even in my world, some of the Gen Xers, as to what they see as being the concept of timeshare. Because I have never heard somebody say, I don't want more space on vacation. Or no, really. If we have the choice of multiple bedrooms, I'd rather have me and all my kids sleep in the exact same room and me have to go to bed at 10 o'clock when my 5-year-old is bedtime for bedtime. No one complains about the space. I've never heard anybody really, as far as the resorts are concerned, the quality, the management, all those things go along with it. The resort amenities that come along with many of these resorts, they're all top notch, world-class offerings everywhere. But for us, it's moving beyond I don't want to go back to the same place at the same time every year, or I don't want to go ahead and necessarily sit through a sales presentation. Those are the things that we want to sort of melt away and dispel the myths, especially about the use and the flexibility that is today's timeshare.
So it's interesting that, because there's definitely a misconception in that regard. But I was just thinking about how, even I've mentioned to you previously that I'm going away this summer with my family, and it was very hard to find any accommodation where we could kind of complete everyone's needs. When I was growing up, I remember my parents struggling to be like, we need a hotel room when it was two children and 2 adults. They'd have to book 2 rooms that were adjoining. We didn't have Airbnbs. I don't think they looked at timeshares back then, but even, me booking this year, it was hard. We ended up booking an Airbnb, and in London, we had to book a hotel with 2 adjoining rooms. But it, of course, from a convenience standpoint, especially if you have small children, right? Having that access. But it's not just families or people of my age that are struggling with this, rather leaning into it. You mentioned something interesting, which is millennials and Gen Z are also embracing this style of travel. Talk to me a little bit about that, because I do find that interesting.
So let's start with the general perspective of a millennial and Gen Zer. The millennial Gen Zer has grown up in the sharing economy. First and foremost, they're used to sharing things. They're used to Uber. They're used to calling somebody to get their food delivered. They're used to all these different things that split up whatever it is that they're wanting to have. And it's a very easy concept for them. They are used to sharing bedrooms, right? They're used to Airbnb. They're used to lots of different things. And they're used to these vacation rental platforms to be able to enjoy their vacations. We also know, just like my kids who've grown up traveling in timeshares, many of them have traveled with timeshare parents or grandparents who own timeshares. I've met a number recently who had grandparents that are looking to give their timeshares to their grandkids, or take them on vacation every year. So they've experienced the timesharing lifestyle. They understand what it's like to travel in those type of accommodations versus the adjoining bedroom for a hotel room or a single hotel room. And once they're familiar with the concept, and they're also sort of bucking the trend, which we think that millennials and Gen Zs don't believe in ownership. Part of it is maybe they don't believe in owning their own home, but they don't have a problem owning their own vacation. And because vacation is no longer a thing you have to convince a Gen Z or millennial to take. That's a huge trend that we've seen, especially over 20 or 30 years. It used to be you needed to convince somebody that they needed to take timeshare. They needed to take vacations. They needed to spend time with family. Family time was important. Relaxing was important. Convincing people that timeshare was a way to get you to commit to taking those vacations. Millennials and Gen Zs are taking vacations, period. I mean, you don't have to convince them otherwise. You don't have to convince them of work-life balance. And knowing this to be the case, all of a sudden, having ownership in a timeshare or in a timeshare system where they can vacation all over the world and see urban destinations as well as beach and mountains, it becomes a very attractive opportunity for them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, one thing I was surprised to learn is that people don't actually have to own a timeshare to enjoy many of these resorts. Can you explain how that works?
Sure, absolutely. If you look at the way that any travelers travel, and especially we'll take a look for one moment at those Gen Z and millennials, because actually that comes a little bit of surprise that half of all timeshare owners are Gen Z and millennial, and 2/3 of all new purchasers are Gen Z and
It's
millennials. So
crazy.
crazy number, and it's great to see. But when it
Yeah.
comes down to how they got there, and this is an important point, as you mentioned, you don't have to own, and many of them have been exposed to the concept, have learned about timesharing through rental and the ability to rent. There was a significant number of nights rented last year. They had over 12 million nights of timeshare rented in 2025. It's a big opportunity, and that's just coming straight from those developers like Marriott, Hilton, Travel and Leisure, all these folks who are renting timeshares out there. People get a chance to experience it for themselves and understand first and foremost what the base product is like before they decide whether they want to be part of an ownership community. And it is a big deal that people don't, I mean, to me, it's important that people know about this because I think they do believe, well, I don't want to be an owner. I don't want to travel on timeshares. Well, it's okay. You can test it out for yourself and you can find it through so many different places. Because I'm often asked this question, is our vacation rental platforms, are they competition? And I say no, as a matter of fact, they're a distribution channel. You go into any of these vacation rental platforms and look for a multi-bedroom accommodation in a resort destination or even urban destinations, you're going to find timeshares there. And it's a great way for someone to take a look and see whether or not the lifestyle fits them.
Well, if someone has never experienced this kind of or style, I would say, a vacation before, where would you send them first? Like, are there destinations that you would send them first? Obviously, that depends on people's preferences and lifestyle and whether they have children or not, with their age. There's a ton of variables. But are there any that, you would call out that you think are good when it comes to this?
Yeah, you're so right. If you've got the ability, if you've got a big family, yeah, obviously destinations like Orlando, Myrtle Beach, even places like Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg in Tennessee, Smoky Mountains, they offer, I'd say, for your beginner timeshare, lots
Right.
of amazing amenities and lots of amazing things to do while you're there, whether it's nature, whether it's amusement parks, whether it's the beach. Those are the places where you kind of start, right? I think some of the places where you go once you become a little more advanced in your vacation world, it could be ski destinations. Colorado, we've got a number of timeshare resorts that are ski destinations all throughout Beaver Creek, Vail, Breckenridge. You look even in Utah, you've got some amazing places in Park City. And then you've got some just great outdoors adventures in California, Southern California, and places to go like that. And actually some of my personal favorites have become urban destinations, like where you
Mm.
are in New York City. There's a number of timeshares in New York
I
City.
can't believe that. Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
There was a resort I stayed in a couple of years ago. We had a great time. A resort called Midtown 45. It's a beautiful resort in Midtown, obviously. We stayed in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, about 900 square feet with a kitchen. And it was an amazing experience. So when I look at sort of my maintenance fee for my week that I pay, I'm fortunate, but I don't have a loan. 80% of all timeshare travelers travel just paying their maintenance fee every year. When I look
Mm.
at how much my maintenance fee was, and I look at the type of unit I stayed in, it would have probably cost me my entire maintenance. It would have cost me at least the amount I paid in my maintenance fee for one night, let alone 4 nights in this accommodation. And I look back and say, okay, where else are you going to stay in accommodations like that? But the professional management, safety and security wasn't an issue.
Well, I was going to say
And
safety and security is a big thing. I mean, that's a whole
yeah,
other thing with this, right? Is you feel
it's
you're
great. Yeah.
safe.
Yeah. On-site security and on-site staff 24/7. But that is important. A little bit of difference with so many other vacation rentals that I really felt good having my family stay there. And again, it was a little vacation. It still continued to be a great vacation. It would have been great with my family no matter what. But everyone having their own space, having their own bathrooms, having their own bedrooms, it
And that's a
worked out
big
so
one.
well, made
That's
the
a big
vacation.
one. If you're traveling as a family of 4 or more, you like having that space. The own bathrooms is a huge one, especially if you have girls,
Yeah.
because they're in there for like hours.
You know what? It's great to know you're so right. And everyone has their opportunity, everyone has their chance to be them. And that's what makes
Yes.
these vacations sort of it's the unseen parts of the vacations. It's not the parts of the vacations that show up in the photos. They aren't
No.
the pictures at the park. But when you look at what makes that day so much better is waking up and separating those bedrooms, having your own bed, being able to do your own, you be able to have your own time to yourself. All that is so
Yeah.
important.
Well, there is, and it is beautiful to see as somebody, again, who's worked in this industry for a very long time at this point. I have watched how way back when I started in travel, I saw a trend in the concept of home away from home. And I think, especially, with all due respect, Americans like to feel very comfortable when they go somewhere. Not that Europeans don't, but again, we were used to getting car sick in the back of a car. But there is something to be said about having that comfort point of a home away from home, and especially, that's why I was so interested when you were talking about the whole Gen Z, like younger people booking their situation, whether it's with friends or whatever. But when you've kids, I mean, I saw that starting a decade ago, and it's only really blown up where people went, oh, great. I don't have to ask the front desk for milk at 9 p.m. for my child or whatever it is. You have the ability to feel like you're in a home away from home, but be in a different destination. I do think that's a trend that I've just seen growing and growing and growing more. And I think it's really wonderful that you're kind of unveiling what timesharing really is and the bright side of it and all the benefits and how it is a growing industry at this point. And that kind of brings me to another interesting question I had for you, which was about national parks. Because I was intrigued as to, you mentioned a bunch of ski destinations, and I definitely can see that being a huge market just because when you do activities, I had a Olympic skier on the podcast last week, and she was talking about when she travels, she has to bring so much equipment. And it's one of those things where you don't want to be in a hotel room with all that going on. You want to feel like you can lay everything out, like you've got space, and it makes complete sense. Between ski destinations, beach destinations, and now I'm discussing with you national parks, they seem to be having a huge moment. For someone planning, right, their first park adventure, what advice would you give them?
You did mention one thing there when it comes to equipment and gear. It is so true.
Yeah.
Planning where your home base, because if you're looking to be a part of an outdoors adventure, then your resort, your accommodations have a very different feel to them and purpose than if you're going to the beach or you're going to an amusement park, for instance. The amusement park folks are going to use that home resort where they are probably for 2 or 3 days of swimming by the pool, not necessarily having to go to a park, getting out of the heat, perhaps. You go the other way to a national park, and your accommodation doesn't need to be nearly as big. Right? You're looking now for location. You're looking for access to the parks, which we're fortunate enough to have some timeshares that are located up, say, near Yellowstone. There's one that just recently opened up, a beautiful resort in Moab, Utah, to be there for the outdoors person who wants to get out there and bike and adventure. So there's areas where you're looking for location. You're not looking for a place that's going to have I'd say your needs in mind, be able to have thoughtful itineraries, things they can curate for you before you even go. Let you know exactly where you're going to be able to go, what kind of park schedule you need to set to do the things you want to be able to do. I think it's so important, though, the location. How are they going to set you up to maximize your time when you're at the parks? The
Yeah.
parks are a little different now as far as access is concerned. There's the thoughts and considerations. So you're going to need help doing all those things. And I think it's extremely important that people focus in on that when they're looking for a national park type trip.
In your opinion, how can staying outside the park actually enhance the experience?
Staying outside. So staying outside the park to me gives you another point of view and perspective. I think the parks are beautiful. Believe me. I think they're fantastic to stay inside the parks. I think when you're outside the parks, you get this chance also to be able to really kind of have a secondary experience in addition to the park experience, and maybe even mix it up a little bit. And maybe sometimes staying in the park, staying outside the park. I think it goes back to that local culture. It goes back to which what you want from your vacation. Is it to be, I would say isolated, but is it to
Mm.
be around a larger group of people that may be in a similar situation? Or if you're looking to sort of separate yourself completely from everything else, if that's part of what you're looking to do, then I think those are the things that'll sway your difference between whether you camp, say, for instance, inside the park or stay in accommodations outside.
I've had a theory or a motto, if you will, since I started in the travel industry, which was travel to do what you love. And mainly because that's how I started in the travel industry. I started in snowboarding and surfing and covering that in journalism. And I would travel to do a particular activity, right? So that's kind of, it was my fuel, if you will. And now there is a reason, especially with the younger generations, where whether it's sports or films they've seen, like Bridgerton, who hopefully pronounced that correctly. I haven't watched it. But, like, they're like, no, we want to go to England. I'm thinking, why do you want to go to England? Because that's where it was filmed and we want to go see a castle. And it's interesting that the fuel has become around, not just, sports, but concerts. And there's a huge uptick in people going to destinations for specific events, especially in the US. And my question for you is, we're seeing sports, especially, become a huge reason people travel. And how much do you think that's influencing where people are planning their vacation?
Massive influence. And the experiential side of travel, I mean, travel itself is an experience. We can all recognize that. However, going for these live events, and I've seen it written a lot about live tourism or other type of tourism when you're looking to go to specific events, sports included. But it's been a concept that's been embraced by the timeshare industry for about 10 years now, maybe even longer,
Mm.
in driving experiential travel, sports travel, golf tournaments, LPGA, PGA golf tournament experiences, racing, both NASCAR and Formula One. I took my
Yeah.
kids to I had a Formula One vacation in Las Vegas last year at the Hilton Alara Resort, Hilton Grand Vacations Alara Resort. It was a great experience. It was right there on Harmon Avenue, the last straightaway before the paddock. And we got to watch Formula One racing for 3 days and had an absolute blast. Today, you see it even more. The World Cup obviously being the big event this year for sports and people traveling to it. It's become a huge benefit of travel, and especially
Hmm.
loyalty travel. And the timeshare industry, we see timeshare owners at games, matches all over the country right now. Consumers in general are gobbling up experiences. It's
Yeah.
what's making it makes it that much more special. It will continue to be a driver. I don't think there's any end in sight that people between small concert venues or even large, if they want to be in Wembley Stadium and head over to Europe for that, or they want to be in one of the larger arenas and larger stadiums here in the United States to watch a concert, to watch a race, to watch a game. All of those things have had such a premium. And you can see it in what the ticket prices are. You can see it in how people are traveling, how Europeans are traveling to the United States for it. I think that might be one of the most authentic things we've seen are social media feeds from Europeans who are taking those road trips from city to city, where they might be going to watch their favorite team and experiencing everything from Texas barbecue to, I think we've seen now, ranch dressing, right? The miracles of
Right.
ranch dressing being a thing. When you look at all of this that comes along with sports tourism, it's one way to unite us. It's a common game that no matter what language you speak, you can play. You play a similar way, and it will be a uniter and has been a uniter for time to come. And it's exciting to see how both in the timeshare industry it's embraced and it's moving forward, and people are seeing values of ownership, be able to add access to all these amazing events, or whether it's just your I'd say everyday tourists just coming here to the United States or traveling abroad for a live event. It is something that's now becoming so much part of travel. It's totally integrated now, and in the best of ways.
It's an interesting question. How do you think, well, has there been any, and I'm going to imagine the answer is yes. It's more of a how question. Has social media, I guess, enhanced or helped or been involved in the development of the timesharing community?
Social media has been integral, really, to really showing everything that's part of the timeshare industry. Before, telling stories through reviews, telling stories through print. If you look at the way that we used to tell our story, it was very much, and the way we're telling the story right now with you, Francesca, as far as the industry is
Yeah.
concerned, this is new,
Yeah.
right? This is
Yeah.
something new.
Right.
As far as our chance to have authentic conversations and be able to discuss really what's happening in a particular industry. It has been so key for us to be able to have campaigns like Go Timesharing, to have partnerships that we've had. If you go back to sports, we had a big partnership this year with the Orlando Magic, the NBA team in Orlando, where we were able to promote Go Timesharing in the arena, and even were able to award as part of the sweepstakes. We had 4 people that went and watched they watched the Orlando Magic at an away game in New Orleans. They stayed in a timeshare while they were there, got to experience the city in that way. For them to be able to show their experience, to teach other people what it's about, really, just like sports tourism has become a sought good. The
Yeah.
goal really for the timeshare industry is to become a sought good, for people to say, this is the way I prefer to vacation, and I would like, I woke up today thinking to myself, maybe I was going to buy a timeshare. We all know we want to go vacation. I know it's a high aspiration to say I want to go buy one of these things, but that's where social media can help. That's where it can help show the authentic experiences people are having. It can show the quality of the product. It could show the happiness of the owners. But 92% of all timeshare owners are happy with their timeshare owner experience, which is a great satisfaction rate. We'd love it to be 100%. Hope it gets there one day. But you look at how that gets to be the case and how people get to learn about the product, it has to be about people sharing their authentic experience and those essential reviews coming from the owners or renters themselves.
Well, what I really love is the idea of, and I think is, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of a big force behind what you do is kind of rediscovering America, right? And people discovering that America is bigger than it's a huge, huge country with a phenomenal amount of states. It's vast. And I think the idea of I don't want to say rediscovering, but discovering even for the first time America. And to your point, which we discussed earlier, you don't have to go like 10 states over. You can go 2 states over and things can change considerably. I think one of the best trips I ever took, albeit very long, was from Florida to California in a car and going through, and I've never traveled across America. And going there, my journey, I just remember being shocked by how profoundly everything changed state to state. And I was like, wow, this is gorgeous. I don't know how, and rediscovering the road trip, I fully believe in. I think if you can do that, especially if you have a big family, it's an eye-opener. It's wonderful. There's so much about this country I love, hence I chose to live here. I lived in the UK growing up, albeit briefly here, but there's an island. There's only so far we can drive, and then that's it. America's vast and huge, and I think definitely deserves to be celebrated, especially through travel. Speaking of which, the 250th anniversary is creating excitement, obviously, around domestic travel. Any things you're seeing from travelers around that particularly?
You can see from my background right now, I'm very into America's birthday, at 250th birthday with all of the stars and stripes in red, white, and blue. But there is a lot of excitement around it, and there should be. Right? It's a huge event. We all love celebrating massive anniversaries and big events. Being part of the Virginia Tourism Corporation, was very fortunate to be able to sit on that board. We've had a lot of insights into events that are taking place all around the Commonwealth of Virginia, for one, and the country. And if I just talk a little bit about what's happening in Virginia, my little town of Vienna, Virginia, where I live, we've had great events that have taken place, and there's still more to take place, to be able to understand the beginnings of this country, to be able to celebrate so many of the war battlefields that are in the Commonwealth, which is great. Williamsburg being sort of, I would say, the biggest area of celebration, but so much of colonial Williamsburg is on display right now. And for those who love history, there's so many great exhibits. There's so many great things to experience right now to be able to enjoy the, America's 250th birthday. Some of them are in those big cities like Williamsburg, which is a little bigger. Some that take place off the beaten path. That they had the big tall ships. They've been taking the tall ships of the 1700s, 1800s that have been making their way through the waterways. Kind of neat to see them in Alexandria, Virginia, where you could see the tall ships come through, which really could get through no places but bridges today. But really neat to see as far as culture and history. And that really does drive people to get out. There are a number of history buffs. This is the time where really America's putting its best foot forward in not only looking at the way it's educating people who live here, but this key event, as you mentioned before, about the folks coming in from World Cup and those from Europe and all over the world that are taking road trips to experience America. They get to see this too. They get to see this on display, which is the same thing we enjoy when we go see a parade or we go see a cultural event, when we go travel abroad. It fills you with joy. It's happiness. It's understanding somebody else's culture and understanding how their country got to where it is today. I think all these things are awesome. I mean, this is the time and place to capitalize on.
It's so interesting that, and not to go off on a tangent here, but one of the most beautiful things I found when I officially moved to the US was that American had an amazing ability to celebrate every given moment possible. And like in the UK, we just had sort of Christmas, and we waited all year for Christmas. But here, you know, you had Halloween, 4th of July. Like there was always a reason to celebrate something, and I loved that about the culture and environment. And also, again, I mean, going back to travel, like a reason to travel, a reason to take a vacation, a reason to do to explore it within the country. There was always a reason to do things like that, and 4th of July is a perfect example. It's not something I really didn't celebrate until, I don't know, 15 years ago. Even with an American Italian mother, we didn't celebrate the 4th of July we celebrated like Guy Fawkes, but you just burnt wood in your backyard. There wasn't so much around it. And I think that's wonderful. So I'm glad to hear that will promote some version of Americans looking at where can we explore, where can we take our children to understand, where America began and where haven't we explored in America? I still have a bucket list of places that I want to go within the US I have not been to. And I probably will never get to all of them, but I'll try. Okay, so I think we discussed this, but I want your personal opinion. Beach, mountains, or national park? Personally.
I'm going to go to the beach. Relax on the beach.
Good. That's my choice. It's my choice. Second,
they're 100% of the beach. Although I enjoy mountain skiing here and there, but if I'm going to go each and every time, it's the worst.
Do you have a preference on a beach or location that you like?
I've spent a lot of time. We got a lot of resorts, member resorts over in Clearwater, Florida. It's a beautiful area where the beaches, I think, are so beautiful.
Yeah.
As much time as I spent time in Southern California, funny enough, I didn't spend a lot of time on the beach. But there's a lot of beach area here in the DC area, Ocean City, Maryland, which is a great beach area far away from DC.
Yeah, Turks and Caicos is my probably go-to. I mean, the water's stunning. But I lived in Florida for 10 years, and it's nothing like Florida water on either coast, quite frankly. It doesn't matter south or north, it's stunning. When you think about your own journey, what has travel taught you that you carry with you every day?
I travel. I think travel has taught me about keeping an open mind to so much more than I would have ever had my mind open to if I hadn't traveled.
Well, Jason, thank you for coming on Beyond the Map. I'm going to conclude after this by letting people know, but can you remind people where to find out a little bit more about Go Timesharing?
Sure. Yeah. So gotimesharing.com is a great place to go to learn all about timeshare. You can even learn about places you can go if you want to experience timeshare as a renter or as someone who's not an owner.
What does Beyond the Map mean to you as someone in the travel industry?
It means to me digging deeper, more than just what you see on the surface of travel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you, Francesca. I appreciate the time.
So, whether you're planning a cross-country road trip, Looking for your next family vacation or simply searching for inspiration closer to home, be sure to visit gotimesharing.com for road trip ideas, resort recommendations, and travel inspiration. And to everyone listening, if you enjoyed today's episode, I'd love to hear it. And subscribe, leave a review, and share this conversation with someone who's planning their next adventure, especially this summer. Until next time, remember, the best journeys don't just change where you go. They change who you become. Thanks for listening to Be on the Map, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for listening to Be on the Map. And if today's episode brought a little inspiration to your travels or just reminded you to slow down and savor the small things, I'd love for you to follow the show and leave a quick review. Until then, keep packing light, living deeply, and discovering the beauty that exists beyond the map.